So you before you switch it, I'm just gonna say, okay, what type is this? You can see here that it's bytes, but if I change it to, what was it called, text? Ah, now this is a string. This is more useful to me. Rather than just having a bunch of bytes, this is a true string. Bless you. But now I have a string, but that's not useful to me because, say, for example, I wanted to get the title. Well, I can't do that just from a string. So we need to parse this. So we can import a library called JSON. So we use an external library. And then let's go ahead and parse that. So we'll say, we'll just call it data. And then we want to use JSON dot, and we can either load from a string to a dictionary, or we can take a dictionary and turn it into a string. What we want to is, we want to load it from a string. So we do load s for load string. And then now if I wanted to get the title, I could. Oops, we want to do print title. This is just lorem ipsum text for those who don't know. It's just basically Latin text. It just kind of gives you some random words to work with. So don't think that something's wrong or messed up with your terminal. It's just random Latin words. A lot of times we use it just to generate fake data because it's just a historical thing. It goes back like 100 years. So very cool. So we have that. So let's keep on reading through our tutorial here. And it seems like a little bit of extra work to have to import a separate library. And as I'm reading here, okay, this is pretty cool. Because JSON is such a common data format, we don't even have to actually go through that second step. What we can do, instead, we can comment out this line right here. And we don't have to use that JSON library anymore. We can just say that data is, it's going to be response.json. That's pretty cool. It does that part for us automatically. Internally, it'll convert it from a string into our dictionaries and lists and all that stuff. Now, if we're going to be working with this a bunch of times, it seems kind of wasteful to repeat code. In general, if you find yourself repeating parts of code, let's see if we can pull it out somewhere. So to me, this seems like a perfect time where we can pull this out into a separate variable. And usually if we have like a constant that we know isn't going to change or something, usually we capitalize it. So what I might do is make one called base URL. That's why I'm using all caps, is because it kind of represents, it's not a normal variable. It's going to be like a const almost. And then now, anytime I want to use it, all I have to do is do an f string and pull in base URL. That way, if it changes, which happens sometimes, like somebody might change the, like say, for example, you've got a development and production environment. All you'd have to do is change the base URL if you wanted to go from, go back and forth. You wouldn't have to change it in 50 different spots. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, anytime we have a print, I'm just going to temporarily comment that out, or else our terminal's just going to get really messy really quick. So that's if we wanted to find one, but let's get to where we list all of them. So we essentially the same thing, but rather than just saying I want post ID number 1, I do posts. And as you can see, that gave us back all the data. Now let's see what the type of that is. Ah, it's a list. So because it's a list, can't I just use a for loop over that to do some processing like we've done before with lists? So let's do that. And rather than data, since we know it's going to be a post, let's call this, instead of data, we'll call it posts. And then when we do a for loop, we're going to say for each individual post in the posts list, and then let's just print the title. So let's just print each individual title. So we'll say post title. Oops, print post title. And so this printed all the individual titles. It looks messy because it's just lowering up some text, but that's what we're testing for. We're just testing to see it actually work. So that's great. Now, this isn't a super great thing to do because we're working with JSON data. So oftentimes, what we want to do is set up a special header that says we're dealing with JSON data. This works, but it's kind of considered a little bit sloppy. Now, if we keep on going through this request library here, it says, okay, we can actually work with headers. And if we go all the way down here, it looks like we can actually pass our own headers. And what data type is this right here? Is this a list or a dictionary? Dictionary, because we see the curly braces. Now, we're going to pass the same headers every single time. So what I might actually do instead is make a headers dictionary. Now, I just know this because I work a lot with the web. The two headers we want to have is accept, and we're going to be accepting it just means that we're accepting JSON data, and anytime we send data, it's going to also be JSON. And now, just knowing this from the documentation that we just looked at, we pass in headers equals the headers that we just created. Now, it doesn't change anything. It's just a cleaner version. We would actually eventually need this. That's why I wanted to tackle this now rather than later. And as you can see, it'll still output the same stuff. Everything's still this. Oops. Oh, sorry, it's plural. It's headers. So we can get data from the server, but now I want to be able to send data to the server. I want to actually be able to create a new one of these posts, what they call creating a resource. And so a blog posting is going to have its title. So think about it like an email. You have your subject, the actual body of it, and then who's sending it, so your user ID. You can actually see right here, they're requesting application/JSON. So let's go over here and let's go into, there should be an area that talks about posts and posting. So if I want to send data, it looks like I send it over as a dictionary. But now here's the issue. I'm not really sending raw data. I'm sending JSON data. So it actually allows you to specify, because it's such a popular web format, as I mentioned, you can just say, hey, I'm sending JSON data. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's set this up so we can actually cheat a little bit. So we're gonna say that here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna comment this out, but we can't just comment it. We have to put the keyword pass. Pass just is like a placeholder. And now let's work on the next section. Okay. So we can copy and paste this line number 15. But now we're not going to do a GET request anymore. What are we going to do? We're going to do a POST request. Don't get this confused. It just happens to be the same word. This means I'm sending data to the web server, but we're dealing with blog postings. Don't get too confused. It just happens that the two terminologies, but one we're talking about a blog post, when we're actually saying POST means send data to the server, post it to the server. So we're going to do that, but just above it, we have to say, what are we going to be sending? Remember we said JSON equals something? So let's say that our blog posting is going to equal, oops. We can do it by hand, I guess. So what did we need? We needed a title, body, and user ID. Okay, so we'll say that the title is hello. Body So we've created a post. In Python, this is a dictionary, but remember we had that, we could have used, remember we had the json.load s before to load string, and here we could dump it to a string. But what's nice is that this requests library says, well, if you're dealing with JSON, because that's so common, you can just go ahead and pass in JSON directly. Now we can run it, but it's not going to really output anything useful. Now, one of the easiest ways to tell if that's successful is how? What can we check that we saw earlier, about 20 minutes ago? What can I check? You can check, perfect, status code. So let's do this. Let's just print the response.status code. 201. Well, we haven't seen that one before. I'll just let you know ahead of time. They group these together into families. So anything that's 200 means it was successful. So 200 means okay. 200 means it was okay, but you also created a new resource, which we did. We posted it. So that's good. 201 means that it was successful. Let's see if we can break this. So don't change yours, but I'm just going to change mine around a little bit. Let's say if we pass in a bad field. Let's see if this is smart enough to recognize that. I guess it's not. Let's do this. I wonder if we can post it as a string, maybe. See if we can get it to fail. No, okay. So this one isn't sophisticated enough to do that. I think it just takes it in and just always passes it back. But you get the idea. So using this, now you could do things like connect to the Twitter API. The reason I didn't do something like the Twitter API or the Google Maps API or something like that, a lot of those require you to sign up and get a key. But you could use the same exact process to do that, to go through and say, for example, you want to get all the tweets from a specific user. You just pass in the URL, and you would get it back as JSON, and then you could go through and do what you needed to do. So a very interesting library. You can do all kinds of cool things with it. We're not going to get any more sophisticated than that. You can even do timeouts and stuff like that. But that's just the basics. This idea of dealing with web services is incredibly, incredibly common. Remember I told you we're going to do gets, and posts, but there's others. Here are some of the others: put, delete, head, patch, options, and so on. But dealing with web services is incredibly, incredibly common. And since we had a little bit of time at the end of the course, I wanted to make sure that you kind of get the idea. Originally, I thought about letting you write your own, but that's kind of a complicated process, and we have to set up a web server and all that. We can't really do it on REPL very easily, but so this worked out a little bit better because I could contain it in one single lecture. So let's look at your assignment. So knowing all that, your assignment's directly based off of that. Oops. So this is another one of these kind of placeholder type things. It's just a little bit different. So their output, their response is a little bit different. And so on your assignment, what I have you do is use the list users. So how do we go through that process? So I've got list users. So it's saying that to list users, I have to pass. I don't even think you need this question mark after. I think you can just do /API/users. Yeah, you can. So you're like, okay, well, I've got the request, but what's the server? What server do I pass it to? So you might have to search through a little bit on the page. And, oh, they have an example. This is examples in JavaScript. We're writing in Python, but hey, here's the URL. So now you know the URL to deal with. Okay, so you want to, that's the URL we're dealing with. And then we're going to list users. But now what we get back isn't as simple. It gives us some extra information. So I can't just do like directly poke in there and get the users. I have to go to this field called data. So any request I get, I'm going to have to do that, and then square brackets, and then data, and then loop through the users. So I wanted you to get kind of good at being able to read this JSON data format, because again, it directly maps to Python, and it's just incredibly, incredibly common that I just want you to get used to. So this assignment, it's not like you can literally just change the URL names. This is slightly different. You're going to have to actually poke in the data. And so this isn't that uncommon, because if you're paging through data, you know how like on websites, like say for example, you have 1 million responses in your database. You don't want to return all 1 million. What do? You page through it. And so this tells you extra information that we don't really care about today. I'm just going to let you omit that. But it gives you that information anyway. But here we do want the data, so you get the idea. So I want you to go through list users and just print the email addresses. So remember how before we just printed the titles? Here I just want you to print out the email addresses of these. And then use the register user API to register a new user, and then print the status code, just like we did with this right here. And so you'd have to go here, and then you say, okay, well, this is to list users. How do I create a user? And okay, so this is the data format for a user. Okay, any questions?
This is all the guys in REPL.
Correct, yeah. You can, if you have your own environment, you can just do a pip install, but if you don't, REPL works. Yeah.
It says it's due today. Is it due today?
It is not due today. Let me fix that. Okay. So I'm going to stop now. So any questions that you want recorded or anything? Everyone gets the assignment, how it's supposed to work. So actually, let me record it. So I'll set a due for 1 week. I think that's good. If I need to extend it, I will, but I think 1 week should be enough. And then for those that haven't finished assignment number 6, go ahead and finish that. So I'm going to stop recording.